cold wind swept across the jagged mountains of Kunar in northeastern Afghanistan, carrying with it the silence of something ominous approaching. It was the early hours of June 28, 2005, and the moon hid behind thick clouds as a Chinook helicopter hovered above a narrow ridge. Ropes dropped through the darkness, and 4 Navy SEALs descended onto the rocky ground. Among them was Marcus Luttrell, sniper, combat medic, and operator of the elite SEAL Team 10. Their mission was clear: locate and neutralize Ahmad Shah, a Taliban commander operating in the remote valleys of Kunar. The operation, known as Operation Red Wings, aimed to gather intelligence and disrupt Shah's militia, responsible for attacks against coalition forces in the region. The broader context of the war was harsh. Afghanistan was a battleground of insurgency, complex tribal alliances, and unforgiving terrain. For U.S. forces, intelligence-driven missions like this were crucial to dismantling networks that used the mountains as natural fortresses. As Luttrell stepped off the rope and felt the dirt crunch beneath his boots, he scanned the darkness. His hands were steady on his rifle, his breathing controlled, but the tension around the team was tangible. They were deep inside enemy territory, isolated and outnumbered long before the first shot was ever fired. The 4 men, Lieutenant Michael Murphy, Danny Dietz, Matthew Axelson, and Marcus Luttrell, moved slowly along the steep slope. Their objective was to reach a vantage point overlooking the valley where Shah was believed to be hiding. The mountains were a labyrinth of cliffs, loose rocks, and narrow passes. A single misstep could mean a broken leg, or worse, detection by local Taliban fighters or wandering shepherds. The geopolitical weight of the mission was immense. U.S. forces were under pressure to curb Taliban activity, and eliminating Shah's cell would significantly weaken insurgent operations in the area. But the SEALs knew that mountainous Afghanistan rarely gave second chances. Even before sunrise, the mission already felt unpredictable. Intelligence was limited, communication was unreliable, the terrain was merciless. And as Luttrell would soon learn, every detail, every footstep, every shadow, every decision would determine who lived and who never made it back. This was the beginning of one of the most harrowing survival stories in U.S. military history. Long before that fateful night, Luttrell and his team had undergone intense preparation. Weeks were spent reviewing satellite imagery, practicing high-altitude movement, rehearsing sniper positions, and refining emergency medical procedures. For the SEALs, training wasn't just physical. It was the mental conditioning required to stay sharp under extreme stress. The intelligence they had on Ahmad Shah was incomplete. Some reports described him as a minor local leader. Others implied he commanded dozens of fighters. No one knew exactly how well armed or prepared his cell was. Still, the mission proceeded, because in war, waiting for perfect intelligence often meant missing your window of opportunity. During the pre-mission briefings, officers debated troop numbers, helicopter routes, extraction points, and whether a larger force was necessary. But stealth was paramount. A small 4-man reconnaissance team was the most viable option to infiltrate unnoticed. On the night of insertion, MH-47 helicopters flew with minimal lighting, weaving around mountain peaks to avoid detection. The SEALs fast roped onto a narrow saddle between 2 ridges, exactly as planned. The air was thin and cold. Every breath felt heavier, every sound sharper. They moved slowly, each step calculated. The mountain felt alive, shifting rocks, sudden gusts, distant echoes. The men communicated in whispers, maintaining strict noise discipline as they pushed toward their observation point. Then came the first problem. Footsteps. The soft bleating of goats. Shadows approaching. 3 Afghan goat herders appeared over the ridge. The SEALs reacted instantly, securing the men and trying to assess the situation. None were armed. According to the rules of engagement, they could not be harmed. After a tense debate, Lieutenant Murphy made the call: release them. For Luttrell, it was a moment heavy with conflict. They were soldiers bound by law and honor. But deep down, each man understood what releasing the herders might mean. If these men told the Taliban, the SEALs would soon face overwhelming numbers. Still, the decision was made. The herders were freed. As dawn approached, the team repositioned, attempting to salvage the mission. But radio communication was unstable. The mountains blocked signals. They couldn't reach command for updates or extraction options. Every minute felt heavier than the one before. The tension around the team rose, and for good reason. What they feared most was already on its way. As sunlight crept across the peaks, Luttrell scanned the valley from behind a rock outcropping. The world seemed quiet, too quiet. Then he saw movement. A shepherd, the same man from earlier. And with him, more figures appeared. Seconds later, the mountains erupted. Dozens of Taliban fighters emerged from the tree line and ridges, armed with AK-47s, RPGs, and machine guns. The SEALs were surrounded. The ambush had been perfectly timed, exploiting the hopeless terrain. Gunfire exploded through the valley. Luttrell, Dietz, Axelson, and Murphy fought back with disciplined bursts, shifting positions as the enemy advanced. But the Taliban had the high ground, superior numbers, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Danny Dietz was shot early in the fight. His radio skills were critical, and he tried desperately to establish communication, but the signal repeatedly failed. Bullets shredded the rocks around them. RPG explosions shook the mountain. Lieutenant Michael Murphy made a decision that would become legend. He moved out from behind cover, climbed onto a rock, and exposed himself to enemy fire. From there, he called HQ, taking multiple hits while calmly relaying their situation. He completed the call and paid for it with his life. The remaining SEALs kept fighting, each severely wounded. Luttrell was hit by shrapnel in both legs. Bullets grazed his body, and an RPG blast threw him down the mountain. The fall shattered bones and tore his skin, but saved him from immediate capture. Dietz was killed in the firefight. Moments later, Axelson, gravely wounded but still fighting, was also lost. Luttrell, now the lone survivor, crawled across the rocks, bleeding, dehydrated, and hunted. A rescue helicopter carrying 8 SEALs and 8 Army Night Stalkers attempted to reach them, but it was hit by an RPG and crashed, killing everyone on board. The scale of the tragedy deepened. Now entirely alone, Luttrell crawled through ravines and cliffs, using every ounce of strength to stay ahead of Taliban search teams. He could hear them talking, searching, closing in. At one point, exhausted and delirious, he reached a waterfall. He drank desperately, finally able to hydrate after hours under the brutal Afghan sun. And then he saw a man approaching, a Pashtun villager, Mohammed Gulab. Gulab recognized the American soldier was badly injured. Guided by the ancient Pashtun code of honor, he took Luttrell in, granting him protection, Nana Watai. Gulab hid him from Taliban fighters, provided water and food, and moved him from house to house to keep him alive. For the next 4 days, Luttrell survived only because an Afghan villager risked everything to protect him. For 4 long days, Luttrell was sheltered by Gulab and the villagers who honored Pashtunwali. They hid him in homes, caves, and makeshift shelters, refusing to hand him over even when Taliban fighters threatened to kill them. Gulab sent runners toward U.S. forces carrying a handwritten note from Luttrell. That note triggered a massive rescue effort involving helicopters, ground troops, and extensive aerial surveillance. On July 2, 2005, a U.S. rescue team finally located him. Weak, wounded, and barely conscious, Luttrell was placed into a rescue basket. A pararescue man held out his hand and pulled him in, telling him, "Welcome home, brother." The aftermath of Operation Red Wings left deep scars. Marcus Luttrell received the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor in the Navy. Michael Murphy received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Dietz and Axelson were also awarded the Navy Cross for their bravery, but the psychological wounds were severe. Luttrell battled survivor's guilt and PTSD as he recovered. The memory of watching his brothers fall never left him, yet his survival also became a symbol of resilience and honor. He later founded the Lone Survivor Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans suffering from physical injuries and invisible wounds of war. His story was told through his book Lone Survivor and a major film adaptation, ensuring the legacy of his team would never be forgotten. Operation Red Wings reshaped how the U.S. military approached reconnaissance missions, highlighting the need for better communication, terrain analysis, and strategic support for small teams operating behind enemy lines. Today, Marcus Luttrell's story remains one of the most extraordinary accounts of survival, sacrifice, and the unbreakable will of a SEAL. It is a story of brothers who fought to their last breath, and of a lone survivor who carried their legacy home.